Welcome back to Historical Projects, the podcast where we explore iconic achievements from the past to uncover timeless lessons in projects and leadership. I'm your host, David Jenkins. Today I'm really excited because we're travelling to the heart of Sri Lanka, to a place where geology, engineering, politics and human ambition collide in one extraordinary landmark. Now, this landmark raises 200 metres above the surrounding plains, and it's called Sigiriya, better known as the Lion Rock. It is one of the most dramatic and intriguing sites in the ancient world. It's a fortress, a palace, a symbol of power, and a testament to how far a leader will go to shape his legacy. Sigiriya isn't just a rock. It's a story, carved in stone, painted on the walls, whispering through centuries. And today we're going to explore its role, status and duration, along with a few fun facts that make it one of the most historical places in the world. To help us unpack this remarkable story, I'm joined by Kanchana Bishop, an experienced risk professional with over 35 years' experience who started as a process engineer and later completed an MBA. As I said, I'm thrilled to have her here. Kanchana, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks for inviting me.
Now, Kanchana, I always want to understand a little bit about the person that we're talking to. So how did you get here? What is your background?
David, so as you know, I was born in Sri Lanka and I arrived in Australia as a child of 4 years old with my brother who was only 6 months old and my parents. My father was a diplomat with the Sri Lankan High Commission and we were fortunate at that time to be able to stay in Australia and we were educated in Canberra actually. And I left Canberra to do my degree in chemical engineering in Newcastle. I worked for Rio Tinto and BHP. I backpacked around Europe for a year, and when I came back, I met my husband Greg in BHP in Wollongong, which is now called BlueScope. I had my 2 children, and with them worked and travelled around Australia, in Western Australia, Northern Territory, Queensland, New South Wales, and then I finished my MBA as well, as you said, when I was working with 2 young babies in Port Hedland. That's where I finished. And I've worked in projects and operations and more specifically in my passion of risk management throughout my career, spanning over 25 plus years.
I knew you were from Sri Lanka, but I didn't know you came out when you were 4. I didn't know that. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Now, our very first podcast was with Allah, and he talked about the history of coffee and its importance to Yemen. So I always like to ask someone, why is coffee important to you? How do you drink your coffee?
I love my coffee. I like it black, hot, not bitter. A nice long black is also great, especially in summer. But my favourite is actually Debella from Brisbane. But I can't get it in Canberra, which is where I'm living at the moment. So, but still, it's great.
I thought you would have said, for Sri Lanka, you would have said tea.
I love tea too, David. I drink tea, copious amounts of tea every day. And yes, it is very Sri Lankan. We've been to the tea fields in Sri Lanka and it's fantastic. I recommend everyone go there.
Kanchana, do you remember the first time you saw Sigiriya and how did you feel?
I would have seen Sigiriya a few times as a child, David, but the one I remember the most was when I took Greg back to Sri Lanka after we'd just gotten married. And it was just such a sight to behold. It was so beautiful, just breathtaking, really. And as engineers, geeky engineers, it's such an impressive feat of engineering. And also quite heavenly and magical, like the water gardens and the fountains that still function during the rainy season, unbelievably. The frescoes, they've retained their vibrant colours for over 1,500 years. It's quite staggering. And the mirror wall, it was highly polished with this substance that they used, but it would have been fantastic back, 1,500 years or 1,000 years ago to see that. So I felt amazed at this structure.
Now, Kanchana, let's start right at the beginning. Can you take us back to Sri Lanka and to the Lion Rock?
Sure. So Sigiriya's story begins in the 5th century CE with King Kashyapa, he was a ruler whose rise to power was marked by a bit of controversy and conflict. After seizing the throne from his father, Kashyapa needed a stronghold or a place that could protect him and elevate him and project his authority, and he chose Sigiriya, the Lion Rock. And the role of Sigiriya was twofold. Firstly, it was a defensive fortress perched high above the plains, giving Kashyapa a commanding view of any approaching threat. The sheer verticality of the rock made it almost impossible to attack. And second, it was a royal palace. It was designed to impress, intimidate, and inspire. Kashyapa wasn't just building a hideout. He was building a symbol, a monument to his reign, his ambition, and his desire to be remembered. In many ways, Lion Rock became a physical manifestation of leadership under pressure. It's pretty bold, strategic, and deeply tied to personal narrative.
And at this point, I really want our listeners to just Google this place and you'll get a true sense of this remarkable fort on top of this rock. It's just stunning. Kanchana, do you have a personal connection to Sigiriya?
Well, as a typical engineer, I was so impressed by the ability to combine function and beauty at Sigiriya. Really, the fortress is formidable. It's a steep climb, not for the faint-hearted at all to get to the top. The summit palace through the Lion Gate, it's like it's floating above, the land. The pools you see at the top also weren't just for decoration. They were part of an intricate rainwater harvesting system, and the entire rock surface was engineered to funnel water into these reservoirs to make sure there was a year-round water supply for the palace residents. So this, intertwined with the breathtaking frescoes that line the cliff face, the beautiful gardens and the fountains, it's just so stunning, just such an engineering masterpiece, as we've said. It became one of the world's most sophisticated urban planning projects, combining this natural and built environment in perfect harmony. The complex integrated advanced hydraulic systems and the gardens, they still influence landscape architecture today, and engineering feats that continue to amaze.
Really? So their engineering was pretty advanced for their times. And again,
Yeah.
I know for people, when you look at the picture, just try to think, how did they build things on top of it? That's the bit that I'm amazed. Kanchana, can you talk us through its status today and tell us about it?
So today, Sigiriya holds a very different status. It's no longer a fortress protecting a king. It's recognized globally as a UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's celebrated for its archaeological significance, its engineering ingenuity, and its cultural heritage. So visitors climb the same pathways carved into the rock 1,500 years ago. They walk through the remains of the water gardens, the palaces, and fortifications. They stand beneath the massive lion paws that once formed the entrance to the citadel, which is the gateway designed to make, I think, every visitor feel small in the presence of royal power. And I found a photo of when we were there. Just today, actually, I found a photo of when Greg and I were there at those pools in the gardens and on the top. So it was kind of lovely to remember that. So Sigiriya's status today, it's not just historical, it's inspirational. It's a reminder of what human beings can achieve when they combine creativity, engineering, and determination.
Kanchana, what about its duration? How long has it been around?
One of the most remarkable aspects of Sigiriya is its duration. It has survived 15 centuries. So built in the late 400 CE, the site's endured monsoons and invasions and political upheaval and centuries of abandonment, literally, and the relentless passage of time. But still, many of its features still stand. The foundations of the palace, the frescoes that were painted high on the rock face, the mirror wall that was once polished so perfectly that it reflected the king's and the visitors' faces after the king. Even some of the hydraulic systems designed to move water through the gardens and the fountains still function today. So Sigiriya's longevity is a testament to ancient engineering skill, power of intentional building. When leaders build for legacy, their work can outlast empires.
Kanchana, thank you for bringing us up to speed. And now that we've explored the story of Sigiriya, I'd love to open this up and connect it to the world of modern projects and leaderships. I know there are so many lessons hidden in this story. One question I've got for you is, what are the parallels that you see between Kashyapa's desire to build a symbol of power and today's organisational branding or strategic positioning that we see?
Yes, okay. So there are some parallels. Um, so one thing was, the elevated topography. So when we look at that strategy, he built this, on top of an isolated 180-meter rock to stand out physically from the landscape, like establishing premium positioning and high visibility. So a modern corporate parallel would be like a market differentiation. So creating a distinct, highly visible value proposition to lift a brand above crowded, standard markets, like the Olympic Stadium, for example, you could say. So that's one thing. I think the other thing also, like the Lion's Gate, it was forcing visitors to pass through this massive, intimidating stone line pause to reach a summit. So it's shaping the user perception and creating this strong emotional impression on the user. And I suppose from a corporate perspective, a modern corporate perspective, we would try and build like memorable user experiences, an onboarding process or like a flagship storefront that would give that same feeling to the user. The mirror wall itself was, very highly polished. It was reflective. The idea of that was to showcase wealth, art, personal prestige, by controlling that external narrative and reinforcing status of the king. And these days, from a modern perspective, we would be curating this pristine public profile through, targeted marketing and media engagement and social media and all those sorts of things.
And we
And
can see that now, can't we, with the way we're branding towards sustainability and the way companies are
yes.
putting forward, they're changing their strategy and the branding they're using as well, aren't we? We're seeing that right now.
Definitely. Yeah, yeah, I think so. And I think, it's about that sustainability into the future.
Yes. Katchina, when doing the research for this podcast, I was absolutely amazed by the hydraulic systems because they were centuries ahead of their time. How can modern teams foster environments where innovation thrives, just like what they did with their hydraulic systems? What are your thoughts?
That's a great question, David. I love it. So Sigiri's engineers had to seamlessly merge geology, architecture, hydrology, and art. So modern organizations have to form cross-functional teams where, software engineers, AI developers, designers, and marketers collaborate daily rather than working in sequence. So I think it's very similar. Breaking those functional silos is one thing. The other thing is, I think, embracing the limitations. Ancient builders faced severe geographical tool limitations, forcing them, they had to maximize gravity, natural topography, and local materials. They worked within their constraints and they designed according to those constraints. So it would be really good if leaders could, frame tight budgets, limited time, or technical constraints as creative boundaries. Force teams to think laterally. Do you remember when we used to do those creative thinking workshops, David?
Yes. It's interesting you say that because I don't know how you feel about this, but I felt the most innovation comes out when you have less. When you have lots, and we've both worked on projects where there was lots and lots, and I felt people weren't as sharp in the way they thought, the way they collaborated. They just weren't thinking thoughtfully. But when we have less, we have to be more focused on what we're trying to do because we have less, which leads us to innovate to do actually more with less.
Yes, yeah, I agree completely. Yeah. Solving complex problems using the fewest, most sustainable resources possible rather than just relying on all of this money and bloated infrastructure is perfect.
Definitely. We've seen that, haven't we? Just employ more people. Employ more people, but it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily lead to a better outcome, we know.
No, that's right. And look, I think the other thing is just creating environments. I mean, I'm sure that they would have prototype tested, the fountains and how they would work because they relied on gravity from 200 meters up to provide the right pressure down at the bottom to provide these fountains the right height, elevation, and all that. So they would have had to do some, prototyping so that it's a bit less risky because they had to build tunnels and all of this water system to allow for that. That was amazing, really. They didn't have these software tools that we have now.
I've been reflecting, Kanchana. Now, Kashyapa, he built Sigiriya partly out of fear and political pressure. There was a lot going on for him at that time. So I'm really curious, how do leaders today make decisions under stress without compromising long-term outcomes? What are your thoughts?
Yes, so I think these days leaders to make strategic decisions under intense stress without compromising long-term outcomes, they really need to rely on a range of tactics, I suppose, some psychological frameworks, structured governance, robust operational design. I think underpinned by a strong risk-based decision-making focus, having clear objectives, so from a project perspective, that would be cost and schedule. From a business perspective, would be the strategic plan or the strategic aims of the organization. Having critical success factors, so what has to go right to meet the objectives, and a contingency plan for if things go wrong. That I think becomes the required recipe for making decisions under stress.
I like the contingency plan because often when we work on projects, we often go in with such a positive view. We're not necessarily thinking of what can go wrong. And I know we've done work in this space before where we'd sort of work at if something goes wrong, what will that cause? And we'd say, if this goes wrong, this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. And then you start to think of ways you can actually preload that contingency planning with triggers to say, if this happens, we need to do this, and trying to minimize the damage or the changes around that.
Yeah, exactly. I think like leaders really need to avoid making choices based on a single best guess outcome. I mean, they should be mapping out best case, worst case, most likely scenarios and prepare for those scenarios. Not necessarily, at least have a plan. Okay, if this goes wrong, then we can do this. We can implement this strategy, and try and be agile in how they do this. So by preparing for that worst case scenario early, they can make calm and calculated decisions, even if conditions worsen. Projects that do well tend to follow that kind of process, I find. And also, before a crisis hits, these objectives and things there should be non-negotiable stuff that they are focusing on, might be core values, financial reserves, or pro- product quality. This means that they're not going to step on those, trading away that long-term stability for some short-term relief. There's also, I think, maybe using external people or others to come and have a look and maybe be a bit of a devil's advocate for the perfect solution. This is where leaders can get team members or risk management people to challenge those assumptions, point out blind spots in that strategy. That's kind of what I used to do a lot when we do project risk. As you would know, David, we used to do that. So
It makes me think
yeah.
about psychological safety because I know when we did that work, the hardest part was to get people to open up and talk. about, and of
Yes.
course, and to get them to talk about what could happen, because no one wants to say it could fail, because they don't look at you and go, well, you're a team player. It's about how do you get people feel safe to be able to say, well, look, this is going wrong, because I still remembered that if something's going wrong, it's better to talk about it. And I think I remembered from risk, and I was talking to JP, one of our other podcasters, that early on in my career, I thought I was scared of risk, but then I realized that risk is your friend. If you can understand risk, you can then do something about it, and in likelihood, it will not actually occur. As opposed to when you say, no, I don't want to talk about it, it's not going to happen. I think that's what I've learned, that risk is a real friend.
It is,
It,
yeah.
it helps you prevent things going wrong or preventing things from compromising the objectives of your project.
Yeah, exactly. No rose-colored glasses, in other words, isn't it? Like, and I think good leaders encourage people to share, then people should feel safe sharing and that sort of thing. And, then they will share this info. It like takes me back to the Challenger, the explosion, that the issue with the O-ring, people knew about it. Everybody knew about it, but it just wasn't communicated quickly enough or adequately, or the right people didn't take it seriously. And look what happened. So love risk, helps people, helps projects.
What I found fascinating, Kachina, this is our 11th episode, and I've been looking at some wonderful buildings and wonderful projects over many, many years, hundreds and hundreds of years. And what I've always found interesting is the myths that are associated with that. And now when I think of the Lion Rock, it is wrapped up in myth and art and symbolism. How important is storytelling in a modern project leadership? What are your thoughts? How important is that?
Yeah, well, I love this question, David, especially coming from you, because I feel that you are a great storyteller. Okay. And I've learned a lot from you about that over the years. So I think it's a core strategic framework in modern project leadership. Like, just as King Kashyapa used the myth of Alakamanda, the sky city of the gods, to justify his rule and unite his builders. That's what he did. He used this myth, the sky city of the gods. This is a great thing to be doing, and modern leaders can use this kind of narrative to give technical execution a deeper purpose. King Kashyapa also used the physical symbolism of a lion to communicate power and divinity, and modern leaders can use that narrative to give abstract data, maybe complex code, and some grueling timelines a clear human purpose. So attaching stories to all these projects and core strategies for business will get everybody to come along with you in the progress of the project or your business. So
What I think is interesting, I didn't think about storytelling until I got older in my career, because I was leading projects and I was having to motivate people. I think as I reflect now, for the younger generations coming through who are leading projects, is often they get caught up on the technical stuff. But I believe that will not make a major difference to the success of their project. It's how they engage with their teams, how they tell the stories, how they motivate their teams to be able to deliver the work. Because the technical part is really a given in what we're trying to do. But it's how do these new leaders coming through motivate the people around them in the changing world, in a dynamic project environment that's now been overwhelmed by AI. I think the storytelling is now more important than ever.
yeah, no, I agree completely. I think it's critical. It gets everybody to come with you rather than this is just a task. So, and I agree about technicality, the technical side. We all know that we have that. We as engineers or coders or whatever have that skill, but it's just bringing it all together. A good storyteller can do that.
Katchina, when I think of our episodes, our 10 episodes to date, this is one of the older of the historical projects we've looked at. And I'm curious to ask you, what can modern project leaders learn about building for longevity, 1,500 years, rather than this short-term focus that we often get dragged into our work? What are your thoughts?
There's a few things. Firstly, like Sigiriya was not built by fighting the landscape. The engineers carved those structures directly into the existing granite bedrock. They designed those water networks to work alongside seasonal, monsoon cycles. So designing systems to adapt to and utilize the existing infrastructure and environment, how people are going to use it, and that's rather than fighting them, is how we bring that sustainability focus to projects and infrastructure. The other thing is they did invest heavily in foundational materials. Obviously, there was probably a limited amount of what they could use, but they used the dense stuff, the locally sourced bricks and highly fired terracotta, thick limestone plaster that could actually withstand centuries of this tropical weather that it would have been subject to long after wooden palace roofs decayed and things. So use of strong infrastructure and materials from the start is highly important. And again, comes into that sustainability narrative. The other thing was they used this site for multiple purposes across the different eras. It was an elite royal fortress, as we've heard, and it eventually went back to a Buddhist monastery because its structural design was flexible. It was built, so building modular and adaptable infrastructure, again, is another sustainable aspect we should be looking at. And Sigiriya stayed relevant because it was tied to deep cultural symbolism, religious art, and historical poetry. When a project is anchored to some inspiring purpose such as that, and with a clear narrative, the team, the community will protect, maintain, and evolve it long after, the original founders have moved on.
Kanchana, we're about to wrap up. And I just want to turn it over to you and ask, when visiting this incredible place, do you have any must-do suggestions for our listeners?
Yes, sure. So the ascent is 1,200 steps. Start early, spend some time at the water gardens at the base of the rock. You could do that after you go to the top. And go and look at the frescoes. They are incredible. When you get to the top, just sit there and enjoy the ambience, I suppose, the views. It's beautiful. And I would suggest getting a guide. It is helpful because they'll tell you some really cool stories and just enjoy the time up there and relax.
Thanks so much, Kanchana, for taking us on this journey. Sigiriya, the Lion Rock, stands today as a monument to ambition, ingenuity, and the complexity of leadership. It shows us how a leader's vision, even one born from fear and political pressure, can produce something extraordinary. It reminds us that great projects require bold ideas, skilled hands, and the courage to build something that will outlast us. As we explore historical projects like the Lion Rock, we uncover more than ancient stories. We uncover lessons about leadership, collaboration, innovation, and legacy, lessons that still matter today. Kanchana, thank you for sharing your insights and stories. It's been a pleasure having you on the show.
Thank you so much, David. It was my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on Historical Projects. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone who loves history, engineering, or leadership. Join the community and be part of the journey where history meets modern project success. I'm David Jenkins. Until next time.